so grateful to be partnering with Balance. We at MusiCares are lucky to get to work with a lot of amazing individuals and organizations, but we are uniquely excited about this opportunity today. I know that everyone that's on this call is going to learn so much and walk away. This is going to be the highlight of your day. So super excited and super glad that you're here. Before we get started, for those of you who aren't familiar with MusiCares, I just want to tell you a little bit about our organization, kind of who we are and what we do. MusiCares was established in 1989 by the Recording Academy. That's the organization best known for the Grammy Awards. And we were established to safeguard the health and well-being of all music people. So we provide a support system of health and human services across a spectrum of needs that include physical and mental health, addiction services, preventative health clinics, and unexpected financial emergency assistance. And that goes to COVID relief. We, especially lately, we've been doing a lot of that because obviously that's an unexpected thing that we've all experienced. The clients that we assist are broad. It's not just the musicians and the artists themselves. It's all aspects of the music industry. So it's the producers, the engineers, the crew, the tour bus driver. So all music industry professionals are who we're here to support. So if you are a music industry professional and or know a music industry professional who might want to reach out for some support, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find out more information about MusiCares at our website, musiccares.org. Now that that is out of the way, I am very honored to introduce our presenters today, Melainie and Dani. Melainie is the CEO and founder at Balanced Eating Disorder Treatment Center. She is a registered dietitian and a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor. She is the founder and CEO of Balanced Eating Disorder Treatment Center, which offers outpatient eating disorder programs in the heart of New York City. For the past 20 years, Melainie has devoted herself to helping clients struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating develop a more neutral relationship with food and their bodies. Having had her own lived experience with an eating disorder, Melainie knows that full recovery is possible with the right care, and her team at Balance dedicate themselves to that shared goal. Dani is a therapist who works closely with Balance. She's a clinical mental health counselor and registered drama therapist. Dani's work is rooted in body liberation and health at every size frameworks. Dani specializes in working with individuals and groups seeking body liberation and eating disorder recovery support. Prior to becoming a therapist, Dani was a playwright, a theater director, and actor, where she spent many years working with both performers and non-performers to create artistic work about body image, eating disorder recovery, and identity. And we have two wonderful artists who are dealing with comeback to touring and performing as we speak. We have with us Juri Janai, who is Emergency Tiara. As the creative alchemist behind Emergency Tiara, Juri Janai merges left field and classic pop sounds to create something entirely her own, drawing from personal experience and her own feminist expression for art that's as life-affirming as it is thought-provoking. After starting to perform her own music solo in 2010, she formed Emergency Tiara 2 years later in creative partnership with producer and frequent collaborator Dave Cole. Since its inception, Emergency Tiara has expanded to a 7-person band, and the same goes for the project's influences, which range from the French pop of Serge Gainsbourg, Prince, and David Bowie to Ella Fitzgerald and J-pop punk Judy and Mary. Last year's Unsophisticated Circus, which saw release in 2019, a debut album 7 years in the making, stood as a bold introduction to Emergency Tiara's delightfully off-kilter sound as they drew from the wealth of material she'd accrued over the years residing in New York City. And with new music coming later this year, she's just getting started. And we have Scott Tyler here of Rough and Tumble. The Rough and Tumble are a dumpster folk thrift store Americana duo consisting of Mallory Graham and Scott Tyler and their menagerie of folk and homemade instruments. In February, they released We're Only Family If You Say So, an album about what it means to be family and what it means to lose it. At a time when families remain deeply divided about issues big and small, the album has been embraced by fans for its stark honesty, unique storytelling, and well-crafted melodies. With any luck and a lot of cooperation, the Rough and Tumble will be traveling to a city near you in 2021. And with that, again, thank everyone for being here, and I'm going to pass it over to Melainie.
Stephanie, thank you so much. So lovely to be here as well with everyone, and we've got a real treat in store for everyone today. Dani, would you like to minimize the thank you, the title page, so we can actually see our panelists here? And how we're going to start today's presentation is we have Scott and Jury with us. So we thought we would start by just asking them, how has it been for you guys this year through the pandemic and where we are now, where I think a lot of people are starting to get back on tour. Scott, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to open it up. What's this last year been like for you?
Yeah. First, I want to say thank you for having me on this panel. This is so cool. I'm very excited to be here on Zoom with you all. This last year has been it's been a range of different things. We in 2020 we've been a band for about 10 years. Me and my partner Mallory, and we had our biggest touring year yet. We live in a 16-foot camper. We have two dogs. And we just adopted a hamster. And we our year was going to take us all the way from Florida up to Alaska and then over to Maine. We were going everywhere in that 16-foot camper. And March 11th happened and we were in Arizona, and of course that didn't happen. So we spent the year kind of house hopping between people who have extra houses, fans who were friends who had space for us. And it's been a year of, just kind of not knowing what to do. And so just kind of realizing that there wasn't much that we could do. So we found ourselves focusing a lot on, on what was happening in front of us, a lot of, what's happening in the present. And that's been just a huge mind shift for me, especially. I think for Mallory as well. But we picked up a bunch of different hobbies. Mallory's been bookbinding, and she actually is taking she's doing a writer's workshop right now. So because she's had the time to start working on short stories, and I started diving more into guitar and making kombucha and a whole bunch of other stuff, that we just never had time for because we were constantly touring. So it's been a real mixed bag. And but I think as we're getting back out there, we're really grateful kind of for the time that we had and for the people who made it possible to have that time.
Absolutely, Scott. And as you said, a little bit of a silver lining there with some new or activities you never have time to delve into because you're so busy when you are touring. And then also the gosh, what is it? The stress of just not knowing when this is going to end, because as you said, early March, mid-March, we were thinking a month. I know we were, right?
Yeah, I was thinking 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, you're optimistic.
Yeah.
And then it was another month, and then if we had known at the onset that it was going to be a year plus, I think we all, we would have mentally been, that would have been a harsher first month, I have to say that. Scott, thanks for that. I'm going to ask Jury the same question. How's this last year been for you, Jury?
I also like to say thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks so much.
And thank you, Scott, for sharing an amazing, we all, I think, have been there this whole year, kind of like, what is going on? What's our tomorrow look like? What's our next month look like? And so I think first of all, I have to say, I can't complain. I really am grateful for the time I had this 1 year where I was able to kind of I was forced to stop and kind of reevaluate everything in my life, which I didn't have time. I didn't even try to make time before for it. So I'm very grateful. And I think main thing that helped me was to, I guess, drop the expectations, because I always want to know what next month is gonna be like, next year is gonna be like, but that expectation didn't serve me well. And also, again, I also had quite an exciting tour scheduled last year throughout the UK, which didn't happen. So, but instead, again, I was doing the same thing. I was cooking more, reading more, and musically, I had the luxury to work with a bunch of different producers who are really good at technologies and other sides of music that I'm not so familiar with, which, because it's been taken away because of pandemic, to work with other people in the room, it kind of forced me to learn about Logic, Ableton, all those music tools that I don't get along very well with. I had to learn it, and I am grateful that I did, and at least I can do basic stuff now, which is gonna come in handy, I think, even after the quarantine phase is over. So, yeah.
That's awesome, Jury. So again, your silver lining was taking that time, even though we didn't know how finite and infinite really that time felt, and learning some more technical things that really have helped you as an artist and with your actual work and such. So that's a great use of time. I have to say, I was reading, we're in the health and wellness field, and we're reading about all these people who were taking this time to, be the healthiest version they've ever been, and study yoga practice or write a book. And I have to say, I felt very, very ill at the idea of these people having the bandwidth to be able to take on these new projects, when I felt like many of us were just trying to hang on to get through, But that's so awesome, guys. I'm so thrilled to hear how you were able to find that silver lining for you. And Dani, I know you had a couple of questions for Scott and Jury as well.
Yeah, for both of you, I heard you mention a recalibration, or thinking about how you do things. And we can't deny that everyone has changed, right? This year plus has changed us, even though a lot of folks are trying to get back to normal. So I'm wondering for you both, in relationship to your identity as an artist, has anything changed for you in how you see this next phase of your career or your life as an artist?
Yeah, I think you see a lot of people being like the healthiest versions of themselves, the best versions of themselves, and with technology, we're constantly looking at that, and I think that kind of fed into this feeling of missing out that was really present during the pandemic. And we worked hard for the first 3 months. The first 3 months of the pandemic, we tried to write as many songs as we could. We were getting song commissions from our fans who were trying to support us, and it was just so great. But we kind of worked ourselves into this this kind of manic state where we were not healthy. We were drinking too much. We joined a wine club. I was making hard kombucha and, just all this stuff. And it just kind of became unsustainable. So in February, we quit drinking, and we started exercising, like in a consistent way. And like, I feel better. We both feel better. We're happier. We're, it feels sustainable in this way. And not having the pandemic, wouldn't have necessarily gotten us to that place. Maybe another 20 years of being a musician would have finally done it. But it's, because drinking is so much a part of the music culture. And that's, anyway, so we're really feeling grateful that we are here on the other side of this, and that we've made some positive steps, for sustaining our career.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Scott.
Yeah.
I think my case was because of the nature of my band, which I perform with 2 singers and the full band. Everything is choreographed and we are dressed like a fashion magazine. So I was putting a lot of time and energy into performance side of my project, and which I really loved, because especially that's the moment you get to connect with people directly in the same room. But I think I got too carried away. So my attention to the music side, the actual song, was a little bit less paid attention. And so having the pandemics, I was doing the same like Scott. I was just writing. And also during that process, I think I was able to find out, fine tune what I actually want to say more than before. And in the production wise, as I said, learning how to use Logic and Ableton and listen to other artists' music more because we had more time, actually was able to go back to the roots of why I started what I'm doing and kind of cleaning up, detoxing, and not build from the scratch, but I guess cleaning up, detoxing is the best way. And I feel like a new artist.
That's beautiful, Jury. That's great. I love that. Dani, is it okay if I jump in there with a follow-up question for the guys? And that is, Jury, and for Scott as well, as you look ahead to the reopening, right, and getting booked now for tours and such, hopefully for both of you coming up, and if not already, what's the biggest anticipatory anxiety you have, or what's the biggest challenge of kind of getting back into it, or what's the thing you're dreading the most, or anything around that touches upon that?
Yeah, we are back to playing shows. We in middle of June we took off in our camper and are back to playing shows, and a lot of shows that we had booked rebooked us, rescheduled. So I think one of the hardest things is just kind of remembering how to do it. Like Jerry, you probably have experienced this as well, where you're out on tour and you just kind of get into this routine, and you're we definitely had our routine. We knew how to do it every night, and taking a year and a half off, the first few shows I was constantly forgetting stuff. I was I wasn't just wasn't quite there. And so but just trying to remember that I've been trying to breathe more, and just sort of stay focused. And, it's slowly coming back, but, we're excited to be back.
It's great. That's so great, Scott. And I imagine it's like being a well-oiled machine, because like every night, like you've got your drill, right? You've got an almost automatic, because you've got it so down pat. And then to stop that, almost that muscle memory piece, like it takes a little while to get back, and
it does. We're using new equipment too. Like we got some new guitars and some other stuff. And so that's just this whole other mess of trying to relearn how, where all the chords go. And
I love it. Thanks for sharing that, Scott. How about you, Jury? What's your anticipatory anxiety or fears or challenges?
I'm very nervous. Getting back to the stage, and especially as I mentioned, I sing while I'm dancing, and that's a literal muscle thing, cardio, all of the things. And I was taking dance lessons and I was working on my voice throughout the whole year during the pandemics. But it's not easy to do both at the same time when you can't rehearse with the band. You don't really have a show coming up. So I am literally questioning if I'm able to still do that. Only one way to find out, but I think that's the most nerve-wracking thing that I am feeling right now.
Absolutely. Understandably so. I feel nervous on your behalf, actually, Jury, thinking about that. You guys are the best. I think we could sit here for the rest of the webinar and just ask you guys lots of questions, but I am conscious of the time and I know we've got to get through some other content. So if it's okay with Dani and with Scott and Jury and of course Stephanie and Jamie, if we'll move into the webinar section. And Scott and Jury, if you have any questions along the way, you know, please pop those in the chat or shout out. And for our audience as well, please put any questions in the Q&A and or the chat box. And we can also direct those over to Scott and Jury as well. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Really great to have you today. So over to Dani, if you'd like to lead us in, Dani. Thanks.
Awesome. And so we're going to be in two parts. So I'm going to start off with talking a little bit, actually building on what Scott and Jury were talking around in terms of self-compassion and our capacity and the unique challenges to artists. And as mentioned in my bio, before I became a therapist, I myself was an artist, and I am deeply connected to so much of the community that experienced very much what Scott and Jury experienced. And so I really was listening and very attuned to what I heard a lot of folks talking about. And if there are other unique stressors, if anybody wants to put them in the chat or in the question, I would love for you to build on this, because I know that these bullets are a few and do not encompass all the many things that we experience and the unique stressors of that time and then in the present. What are we coming back to? So emerging from a year of social and professional isolation. We just named a shift in energy and capacity by Scott and Jury. Imposter syndrome, the nervousness of your authentic artist having to come back on stage. Is that still possible? Is that still me? How has your identity changed? And Jury talking about looking at her writing and her music differently because she had the time and the space. Shifting away from being at home, the routines we got in, and getting back into the routine. And how can we hold space for both and? That there are many truths, that many things are possible. There's not one right way to get back on the road, to start performing again, but that each of us is going to have a unique way that we get back on stage, we get back on the road. So I'm going to start off talking about self-care and compassion, and then I'm going to pass it off to Melainie, who's going to dig into some of the nutrition piece and really how can we support you all as you step back on the road. So I want to talk about self-compassion. Self-compassion is one of those words that gets used so much, a little bit like self-care. Sometimes we forget what it means. What exactly does self-compassion mean? So I'm going to utilize the work of researcher Kristen Neff, who has really dug into what is self-compassion so we can understand, break it apart, and then how can we use it in our lives. So it's pretty easy for us all to tap into the compassion of another. I come back to the pandemic and the year we had together, really the collective trauma from March of 2020 to now, and our ability to feel compassion for another. Compassion literal means to suffer with, to sit in the challenge and the hardship, and to really feel for another the shared human experience of pain, of imperfection, of suffering. But often it's much easier for us to tap into that warmth, caring, a desire to help for another than it is for ourselves. So how do we practice turning it inward as opposed to living in the assumption that we can have compassion for others and not for ourselves? So let's talk about what self-compassion is not. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It is not being so focused on our own suffering that we do ignore the interconnections and the shared lived experience. It does not allow us, the self-pity can get in the way of us being able to look at something objectively, to zoom out, to be able to depersonalize from our experience, because self-pity can keep us stuck. It can really keep us in a place where we are ruminating and focusing on the things that are hard to move us forward and might hold us back. Another misconception of what self-compassion is not is self-indulgence. I would say the biggest mythology around self-compassion is, well, if I'm too nice to myself, I'll just become complacent. If I'm too kind and I take care of myself, my needs first, and don't push myself, be really critical on my mistakes, I'll never reach my goals. I'll never get to where I want to be. But Kristin Neff's research is so interesting because what she actually proves is it's the opposite. The more kind, the more self-compassionate, the more gentle and understanding we are with ourselves, the more likely we are to be unstuck, to move into taking care of our needs, to reaching goals and achievements that have felt at distance. And so talking about self-compassion really shifts this perspective that to be nice to ourselves is to get us to that next place. And we've been trying it the other way for a long time. A lot of people have really been letting that inner critic run the show. And how's that worked out? We've been trying that for so long. What if we tried something different? What if we allowed ourselves to think about self-compassion in a different way? Self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is really related to our self-worth, our perceived value, how much we like ourselves. Sometimes self-esteem is really external. It's how are we perceived by others, enforces our self-esteem. Self-esteem fluctuates. It can come and go depending on where we are in our lives. Self-compassion is ever present. It's no matter what we are experiencing, are we able to tap in to the warmth, to the caring, to the ability to see ourselves in a way that allows for imperfection. So as we're all talking about what it feels like to be back on stage for the first time, for Scott and Jury, like what would taking the radical self-compassion approach to those struggles or those moments of nervousness, how could that possibly shift things? We're really drilling in still. Okay, Dani, but what is self-compassion? Made up of three things. And if we can hold on to these three different components, we can begin to practice and take baby steps towards self-compassion. So Kristin Neff tells us that the three components of self-compassion are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So self-kindness really comes down to how do we talk to ourselves? How do we treat ourselves? How do we find emotional equanimity, as defined as the ability to accept our emotional experience and the commitment to meet those painful emotions with awareness? How do we cultivate that inner voice and how we talk to ourselves? That the first instinct is when you drop the plate on the ground is to say, ah, you're so stupid, Dani, to, whew, you really didn't sleep well last night. You might be a little dehydrated, unfocused. No wonder you dropped the plate. It's okay. You didn't like those plates anyway. Tapping into how we talk to ourselves is the first step towards self-compassion. Followed up by the common humanity. I think this really taps into this specific community here at MusiCares. When we think about how we are not alone in our lived experience, when we think about the common humanity that is part of the larger human struggle, that reduces isolation. It reduces shame. I am not the only one experiencing these feelings. That's another important component of self-compassion. And the third piece that Dr. Neff tells us about is mindfulness. Mindfulness, like self-compassion, a word that sometimes loses its meaning. So let's get really specific on what we mean by mindfulness. It's to witness ourselves, our actions, our lives, with non-judgment. How do we separate from our experience to be less personally identified to those challenging emotions? I'll come back to the example of Dani dropping the plate on the ground. To look at it with mindfulness is to be without judgment, is to, again, to come back to what led to this action, to me being unfocused, to me not seeing where I was putting it down. I can have self-compassion by saying, I did not sleep well that night. I really am trying to actually multitask. I'm trying to do 8 things at once. I need to slow down. I need to step back and say, I'm going to be more mindful so that I won't drop the plate. And if I do drop the plate, I can look at it with mindfulness and non-judgment and say, it is what it is. These are a different way to think about self-compassion that I hope gives clarity. And of course, Jamie, and we'll pass along more details about self-compassion. I did a really quick overview. And if anybody has questions in the Q&A, please ask, and we'll come back to self-compassion as a way to keep us grounded.
Dani, actually, there's a question there, if I may. This might be a good
Sure.
time before you go in. Or you let me know if you want to answer this after you finish this next slide, which is, this is from Tina, they, them, she. And Tina says, I'd love to hear more on holding space. I'm at a place in my ED recovery and sobrieties where I have to learn to listen even more carefully and contain the somatic reaction or hurt of my body, even when contradiction is being shared publicly, or a space that might not feel safe or inclusive. How do you all cope with the dissonance or dissociation when an art studio or other company feels dystopic or disordered while remaining professional and compassionate or quiet? Great question, Tina. How is that for you, Dani? There's a lot of pieces to that, but
yeah, well, and I'm going to sort of stay in the self-compassion.
Great.
Because we must allow for the compassion that none of us chose to live in a systemically oppressive system around bodies. None of us self-selected into being so present in a culture that is so focused on numbers and size and that dystopic, disordered community, right? Even then, we can find the self-compassion. It's the both and. It's the holding space to say, wow, this organization still feels really rooted in those old oppressive diet culture narratives. And I can have compassion for myself and say, is this a community that supports my recovery, that supports my sobriety? We can have empathy that they're still working through it. And I can have self-compassion that I might need something different with where I am. We do not have to join in. Yes, we know society believes one thing, but why do we have to be the ones to change? Why is it not the system or the society that needs to shift how we talk about bodies, how we talk about sobriety, how we talk about recovery? And that takes a lot of self-compassion to allow ourselves to say, I am going to have compassion. I'm going to hold space, meaning mindfulness. I'm going to look at it in a non-judgmental way to choose liberation, to choose freedom, that we don't have to join in just because we've been taught a certain narrative or a certain belief system. That isn't true. How does that feel, Mel? I can't see you, so I don't know.
Yes, no, sorry, I turned off my calendar, camera to give you the spotlight there. Fantastic. I love that. As you said, just to mirror that or reflect that, empathy for this system around us and these people around us who you know, we've all been raised in this current society and with that way of thinking, but also to maintain that self-compassion for yourself. I love that. I love that. Because otherwise, if you're, you know, I think for a lot of us, we're fighting against that, or we are judging ourselves because we're not conforming to what society is telling us we should be doing or should be looking like, etc. And that sucks so much energy out of you, and the emotional fallout from that, the emotional challenge, if you will, or cost to that is huge. So I really like that idea of leading with empathy and maintaining that self-compassion. Thanks, Dani.
You got it. And we must develop a practice around it. So we can think about it, is it stillness? On here, we have something specific to body image called body checking. It's how we talk to ourselves about when we see ourselves in a reflection, or we look at an old image of ourselves. To hyper focus on a part of our body and let the inner critic go, that's a type of body checking. So a type of self-compassion might be to really not engage in ruminating on our body from the past or our body in the present. observing the self non-judgmentally, really challenging that voice when it comes in and it says, Dani, you're so stupid. I could say, woo, that's okay, self-critic. I know you think you're helping. I know actually you think being mean to me is what's going to help me not drop the plate, but I don't need you anymore. I actually have all these other ways that I can take care of myself and be kind to myself. This is a really tried and true therapeutic technique, is talk to yourself how you would talk to a loved one, a friend. How would you talk to little you? The young child version of you that just wants to feel safe, that just wants to feel heard and understood. When that inner critic comes in, practice talking to yourself as you would someone you love. We always love to talk about dressing in clothing that makes you feel good in the body you have today. Self-compassion really comes also down to comfort and feeling at ease. We're not noticing let go of perfectionism. Easier said than done, I know. And artists can really struggle with perfectionism. We're high achievers. We really like to keep pushing the bar, keep challenging ourselves. But when it comes to this idea that there is a perfect way, it can get in our way, it can keep us stuck. Let's all do this together. Just quickly as like a little middle of the presentation, wherever you're sitting, I want you to ground your feet. Sort of press into the floor. I want us all to just take 3 deep breaths together. In through the nose and out. In through the nose and out. In through the nose. Wherever you are, just a small movement that would feel good in your body. A self-compassionate movement. Is it a roll of the shoulders? Is it a neck roll? Do you need to step away from the computer for a minute and get some water? Self-compassion is also meeting our needs in the moment, really listening. We're not gonna wait to go to the bathroom if we have to pee. That's not listening to our body. We're not gonna wait to get a snack if we know we're hungry. It's listening to our body. All of those pieces really relate to self-compassion. We'll pass this on to you all too. I won't dig in just for time. Another really helpful way to manage stress and to really tap into self-compassion is around a sensory toolkit for the road. As you all are getting back or in your home, do you have certain things that you find grounding? And this is also where we come back to self-care. Self-care can sometimes lose meaning in that we think it means naps and face masks. And those can be a part of it. But sometimes self-care is making sure you get in your meals and snacks. It's making sure you put the phone down and get in the 8 hours of sleep. It's developing tools that can reground the nervous system. The nervous system is really attuned to the senses. So developing something for touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste, that grounds you, that keeps you really present, that you could have at home or you could take on the road. Here are some other things that we know are really helpful. Earplugs, speakers, lots of water. Radical acceptance, I think, also comes into the question that was asked, self-compassion, lots of the things that we're talking about today. And this is from Tara Brach, who does a lot of great writing on acceptance and also on body image and eating disorder recovery. Radical acceptance is a willingness to experience ourselves and our life as it is. A moment of radical acceptance is a moment of genuine freedom. This is a huge concept in Mel and I's work with eating disorder recovery, body liberation. Radical acceptance is for us living in the present, for artists trying to get back on the road, not who we were back in March 2020, not who we think we want to be 6 months from now, but in the present. What do we need? What's our limitations? And what is our capacity? And really trying to honor that. So my last slide before we pass it off to Mel is, as we leave today, thinking about a mental health perspective, our own inner work, our own inner healing as artists, which is really actually a unique tool that you all have is that you are creators, that you have an ability to tap in to your creativity as a healing tool, in addition to your career, in addition to the way in which your identity as an artist. So let whatever you're doing right now be enough. Embrace the imperfection of not knowing, of trying to recalibrate and get back in the groove. I want you to look at your list of things you want to do each day, and then I want you to really pare it down. I really want you to think about what is possible now, not who you used to be, not who you want to be, but today. We've all changed, and that's okay and very normal. And it's okay to say that, as people might have expectations that you can socialize Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that you can do X amount of gigs in a week. It's okay to say, hey, I've actually really changed, and this is what I need right now, even though it's different than maybe how you knew me before. We've all evolved, so have our needs. And with that, we have some resources here that we will send out in the email after. I'm going to pass it off to Melainie Rogers.
Dani, thank you so much. That was great. So to our audience, I am just going to set myself up here so I can see everything. So getting ready to tour again, and I'm a registered dietitian in eating disorder, certified eating disorder registered dietitian actually. So I'm going to focus a little bit on around the health and wellness, the food piece, which is so tough. And we've done this presentation with Music Cares now for a couple of years, actually. I think this is our third or fourth year. And when we have a live audience, it's been wonderful because we've gotten so much great feedback and questions. And so please feel free to pop your questions in the chat box and the Q&A. But, you know, a lot of the Music Cares folks have come in and, you know, all the different aspects of being on the road and touring and such, it just really challenged the norm. And also, you know, Scott was talking earlier about things that are sustainable and the sustainability about taking care of your health on tour, where it's not just this kind of all out binge on everything. And then, you know, you tend to righten yourself when you're not on tour, whenever that might be. So the pandemic reality, if we start there, because that's been a big factor, right? And as Jury and Scott were talking about, it's kind of a forced break that we all had no idea how long it would go on for, and it went on for a heck of a lot longer. And a lot of things happened in that time. And a lot of our clients have struggled with a resurgence in eating behaviors, whether that be overeating for comfort and emotions, or undereating, or getting really obsessive about food and or exercise and their body image. And for a lot of folks, substance use and alcohol. You know, Scott was saying, you know, they started drinking more, and alcohol is certainly a part of you know, the touring culture, if you will. So a lot of stuff that has happened over this last year. Last year has destabilized everyone. And as one of my colleagues and friends, who's a wonderful therapist, said, it's just a matter of how it shows up for you, you know? And so our destabilization comes out in different ways. Food patterns, as I said, undereating, overeating, alcohol, smoking, tobacco and pot, drug use. We've seen a lot of increases in drug use over the year, as reported through the media. Activity levels have either dropped off or, as we said, become obsessive. Sleep and sleep schedules have really been thrown off. For many people, a lack of, not necessarily a daytime structure, but some kind of schedule has really thrown them off. And so what can tend to happen, we often see people going to bed later and later and later and sleeping later and later. And next thing you know, you're living the life of a vampire and you're sleeping all day and up all night, though that may be similar to what it feels like to be on tour, in fairness. Mental health, it's been a lot of exhaustion, a lot of fear, anxiety, financial concerns as well. And that just feeling off center for a long period of time is just exhausting, and identity challenges as well. Next slide, Dani. So pandemic recovery. Do an audit of your health behaviors is what I would suggest. And Scott, I know in February you said actually that's when you guys decided, okay, we're going to stop drinking and we're going to start to try and get a little bit fit and do something a bit more sustainable. And you were able to, right, Scott? You were saying you were able to engage in a little bit of a fitness regime that you were able to do consistently. Did you want to speak to that a little?
Yeah, it's been remarkable, just the ways that we can think more clearly. We're more creative. We're just happier, you know.
Yeah.
And I think you know, going back to just having self-compassion and self-care, it's really great for you, you know.
Absolutely. And I think we forget that because, you know, when you're honestly, I think all of us had, I don't want to diagnose anyone, but I think we all had mild or major depression over this last year. And when you're in that place, it's really hard to motivate. Like in our brains, we have this idea like I should reduce my drinking or stop drinking, or I should start exercising because I know I feel better. But even getting to that first step can just feel insurmountable. The fact that you guys did, and I wonder whether having that partner there, that buddy with Mallory may have helped as well. Because when you're on your own, it can feel really like, it doesn't matter if I go back to bed, I'm not getting up today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you find that, Scott, that it was helpful to have Mallory there to kind of, you know, spur each other on?
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened if Mallory didn't say, you know, I want to quit drinking. You know, she read this great book called Quit Like a Woman, and it's, you know, all about, you know, the feminist reasons for quitting drinking, and so we stopped, and you know, she's the one who pulls up the yoga videos. She, you know, pulls up the, you know, the workout videos. It's, you know, it's just, it is so important to have other people who are keeping you accountable. And
absolutely. Oh, absolutely, Scott. Thanks so much for sharing that. So, as Scott and Mallory did, identifying areas that you want to rebalance and make a plan of how to accomplish. And again, emphasizing having compassion for yourself. Start small. Baby steps really, really count. And we actually find that our clients are more successful, even though I know it doesn't feel as sexy, to just start out. Maybe you set the goal, as Mallory was doing, I'm going to do just 1 10-minute yoga stretch, or I'm going to do 1 2-minute meditation if maybe you think that might be helpful. Whatever it is, start small. And I also recommend number 5 here is starting with sleep first. I can't tell you guys, and I'm sure most of us know intuitively, but I'm learning more and more about the neurobiology of the brain and how sleep is so impactful on mood, cognition, health, and the rhythms of your body, which affect you know, mood, hunger, fullness, the whole 9 yards. So don't overlook sleep. We can tend to do so. Develop a schedule, try to recalibrate. And then I'm the nutritionist, right? So wanting to talk a little bit about planning your meals to follow that schedule that you've set up for yourself. And it might be that, you know, today I'm going to try and go to bed 30 minutes earlier, and you start gently, slowly peeling it back, almost like you do when you have jet lag and you do that 30 minutes or an hour a night approach. Plan a daily walk outside or some other activity. Number 9, which is exactly what Scott and Mallory were doing, get a buddy to help with accountability. So helpful. And that's great on those mornings where it's like, yeah, the duvet comes back over the head and I'm not going out today. I'm not doing it today. And reach out for help now for more problematic behaviors that you may need extra support with before you head back on the road, because certainly with the stress and the challenges of being on the road and touring, that is not necessarily the time where you want to be doing some more hardcore work around any problem areas. And Dani, just on to our next slide. So on tour, self-care, food and nutrition. So traveling challenges, I'm sure you can all relate. Hunger, irregular schedule, stress eating out most of the time, overeating out of habit, or, you know, certain cities are associated with certain foods. I've heard some of the Music Cares performers tell me about this. You know, if I go to such and such a city, I have to have, you know, the dish that they're famous for. And so then you end up overeating. headaches, indigestion, constipation, fatigue, put those all together and you feel pretty bad. And then bloating, and that feeling impacts your body image and your self-esteem. And I think as performers, and I'm thinking about you, Jury, especially, how you're talking about the whole costume piece and the performance piece. So a great deal of focus on what you look like from an image perspective on the stage. And so with that many eyes on you, some of this body image stuff can really come up, and feeling bloated and lethargic and out of, not in your physical best can really impact how we then feel and how we then perform as well. You may know this acronym commonly used in AA circles: HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I would add in bored and a lot of other emotions over this last year, especially. These key feelings or states of being are connected with emotional and stress eating, drinking, and using drugs. I think no surprises there, but it's a great acronym, because if you find yourself thinking, I want to eat something, but I'm not hungry, you can then go, okay, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. What is this feeling really about then? Am I really hungry, or am I angry because I had a blow up with, my producer? Or am I lonely because I'm on the road? Or am I just tired, God damn it, because I've jet lagged, or we've been traveling and not sleeping well? And to try and separate out those feelings from the behaviors around, in this case, food, or reaching for, any other kind of emotional crutch that makes us feel better in the moment, for sure, in a short term, but we know the next day we're not going to maybe feel as great about that decision. And then, of course, disordered eating patterns. And disordered eating patterns are really, if you're finding yourself under eating for long periods of time and then overeating, or trying to undereat and count calories a lot of the time and not fueling yourself adequately, or the reverse, where you're actually overeating a lot more. All of those can be part of this disordered eating umbrella, and all of those behaviors create a great deal of distress. They may not be at the diagnosable extremity of a full-blown eating disorder, hopefully, but make no mistake, it's still significant and can really impact your mental and physical health. So it is significant to look at those patterns and again, lead with compassion, as Dani said, and get some extra support if you need it. Let's go to the next slide, Dani. Thank you. If you're sitting there thinking, do I eat in a disordered way? What's my relationship with food like? How do I feel about it? Here is a great litmus test question to ask yourself. How much of your day do you spend thinking about food, calories, exercise, if that's part of your gig, body image, and maybe a number on a scale, if that's part of it as well? So how much of your day do you spend thinking about those pieces around weight and body image? And you may be really surprised. And so I'll give you a second to just think about that. Is it 10%? Is it 50% of the day when you're not distracted? How much of the day is it? And we know from the research, AN here stands for anorexia nervosa. People with full-blown anorexia nervosa can spend more than 100% of their day thinking about calories and weight and body image. And you may ask the question, there's only 24 hours in the day. How is that possible? And the reality is that people who are restricting to such extremes are dreaming about food. That is how obsessive it gets. For bulimia, BN, and binge eating disorder, BED, as here on the graph, it can be as high as 80% of the day. And guys, this is 80% of your thoughts and your bandwidth, and you're still having to then perform and do life and have your relationships and take care of your fans and take care of your, whomever your managers, etc. That's a lot of bandwidth being dedicated to something other than your craft. And just as a bit of a reality check here for anyone who's never had an eating disorder or never had disordered eating, I don't know who they are, because I think it's most of us in this current very thin, obsessed society, but it's about 15% of the day. What does that look like? That looks like you get up in the morning, you realize, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, let me grab some breakfast. I grab my breakfast. I'm full. I stop eating. And then I forget about food until I get hungry again later. And I realize, oh, it must be lunchtime or snack time. And then you grab something, you're full, you forget about food until you get hungry again later. Right? And for those of you who are thinking, wow, people can do that? The answer is yes, they absolutely can. And if you find that that's maybe you're spending a lot of time calorie counting and thinking about what you're eating to a point where it gets really obsessive, then again, it might be time to get a bit of extra support. We'll go to the next slide, Dani. Thanks. So self-care. So some traveling challenge scenarios that some of the Music Cares artists submitted to us were all the restaurants are closed, right, after hours. We're so lucky in New York City. We're based in New York here, where a lot of restaurants, well, pre-pandemic, they were open pretty late. Not so much right now. But let's say you're touring and you're in the Midwest, which Scott and Mallory, I know you guys are often. And so in some of these smaller towns, the restaurants certainly might be closing a lot earlier. Or you're in the scenario of I'm hungry now and there's no scheduled break, or there's no access to a microwave or a kitchenette where I'm staying. Or my sleep schedule's off and I want sugar because I'm just, you know, I'm lethargic. Or how do I make healthy choices, so-called healthy choices, when everything is brown, AKA fried, and my payment is dinner at the diner? What the heck do I do with that? How can I still kind of take care of myself? So these are some common scenarios, and we'll go to the next slide, Dani. So expectations, what do you do with that? And I'm just going to say right out of the gate, perfection is not our friend here. Like, it's very, very hard to have this perfectly mapped out when there's so much that you can't control. So I think it's really important to just acknowledge that. And I'm a nutritionist, so I'm legalizing that to just do the best you can. Accept that it won't be perfect. Planning will certainly be required to make it a little bit easier, and planning around food and snacks may be not what you really love doing. It's kind of one of those, oh, you got to be kidding me. I'd rather be focused on the music and the new instruments and the new technology and the new outfits maybe for you, jury, right? So much sexier than thinking about this stuff. But nonetheless, it can really help to fuel you to then be performing at your optimum on your gigs. So carrying snacks with you will help immensely. Drinking lots of water, I'm sure many of you already do that. Limiting or avoiding the alcohol, as we said, that's kind of a part of the touring life. So, you know, maybe moderation is your friend there. Mindfulness eating is also your friend, which means to not zone out. Mindfulness eating is where you're in the moment, in front of the food, and you're looking at the food and you're tasting the food and you're actually realizing that you're eating. Have you ever, have you ever been in front of the computer and you've got lunch on the side and you're doing all your emails and doing your planning and you're eating at the same time, and you turn back to your plate and all the food's gone and you don't remember actually eating it, much less maybe tasting it? I've certainly done that. We all have, right? We're not perfect, but it's a bit of a shock. And if portion control is hard for you, then you might end up having eaten a heck of a lot more than you wanted to. So not zoning out, turn off the computer just for a sec. Try to stay tuned in, therefore, to hunger and fullness. Easier said than done. Absolutely. We know that with sleep deprivation and fatigue and all that good stuff. So again, point number one, do the best you can do. And commit to doing the best you can do each day, but being compassionate with yourself as well. We'll go to the next slide if that's okay. And Jamie or Dani, if there's a question that comes in you want me to answer, just interrupt there. Yeah, Dani, do we need to go back to the slide before? Are we on the right sequence here? Yep.
Yeah. Apologies, all. I actually can't look at the questions because I'm running the slides. So Jamie, if you want to jump in and see if there's anything we want to name.
Yeah, that's okay. There's one kind of question floating around body image, but I think not quite the right section to pop it in, but I'm waiting for it.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Dani. So eating on the road, step one, snacks. Pre-pack snacks, non-perishable. I'm a big fan of Costco. Buy in bulk and save. And, you know, depending upon where you're traveling, out in the Midwest, Walmart is pretty popular and inexpensive as well. So inexpensive, not meaning that snack quality is not good, not at all, but just more economical, which I think suits everyone's budget. And I'm a big fan of Ziploc bags or reusable type of, you know, the silicone bags you can buy now, where you can divvy it up for yourself. So you can kind of plan out your snacks for the next few days, do it all in one batch and you're done. Small plastic containers or some such similar container, and then have a bag of snacks for each day. And then if you need to, and I have clients who do this, they actually take a larger bag or an extra suitcase for all their snacks. I don't know if that's doable for you all, depending upon transportation, etc. But I'm serious, they'll pack it with a whole heap of different kind of like Kind bars or different snacks that they like, maybe Trader Joe's or Costco, and maybe you can't get those where you're going. You know, if you're heading to the UK, which you were, Jury, you know, the snack choices there are different. And so you might want to pack some snacks that you know you like, that work for you, don't upset your GI. And then you can figure it gives you a little bit of a buffer. So when you're there in the UK, you can have a look around and see what they also have to complement your stash, or you know, just gives you a little bit of flexibility there. So I can't tell you how important snacks are. In my case, I've been in situations, I'm sure we all have, where I thought I was getting lunch didn't happen. So I just combined a couple of different snacks, and that was it. That was my lunch, because I had no other options, and that's okay. And that's okay, but this is a way to prevent you from having those massive energy slumps, which we'll go to the next slide, Dani. So, you know, I'm going on and on about trying to eat consistently throughout the day. And the reason for that is because we want your blood sugars to be wave-like throughout the day, meaning not spiking and crashing. When you spike and crash, and we'll see on the next slide, it sets you up for overeating. So our goal is eat a little more consistently throughout the day, which is why in our field, we're big promoters of, you know, 3 meals and a couple of snacks. Now, intermittent fasting is a really big trend right now, and there's been some purported research on it. But I will tell you this, intermittent fasting, if it messes with your natural hunger and fullness cues, is not going to set you up for success. It's not going to be a sustainable option for you. And I'm sorry for those people out there who are loving intermittent fasting. But we've found that what it can do is ends up that our clients are restricting or not eating for 18 hours of the day, and they're only eating in a 6-hour window. And then they can tend to overeat during that 6-hour window. And I'll give you an example. You know, in some countries where Ramadan is a big part of the religious religious rituals, where, you know, as you know, Muslim folks will then fast all day and then eat after the sun sets. We actually see that in those kind of cases, people gain weight over that 30-day period during Ramadan. So this idea of not eating for extended periods of time and then eating in a shorter period of time can set people up for overeating and weight changes. And I apologize to folks out there who are trying to be weight neutral, but I also want to state it clearly, because I think a lot of people are intermittent fasting because they're hoping to lose weight and change their body shape and size. So I want to just, you know, bust some myths there. So we'll go to the next slide, Dani. Dani, did we miss the slide where there's a spike and crash? We might need to go back. Just, can I navigate this on my end as well? Maybe I can. There we go. And so thanks, Dani. And so what am I talking about here with that consistent eating and not doing, you know, massive times without eating? Is that your blood sugar levels, this is the physiology of what happens. So your blood sugar levels start to drop. You get to a point where your body is registering, we need this many calories today to fuel the body optimally, and we're here. So we need to get back up to here. And this is what literally goes on with this incredibly intricate regulatory system in our body. And so the brain then starts to say, okay, well, we're going to have to do something a little different at this starvation place than just salad or just quinoa or maybe just some steamed chicken or whatever you're planning on eating that night. I mean, I'm exaggerating those very so-called healthy, not healthy, they're not healthy, they're very diety foods. And so what happens here is the brain sends a signal, seek out food, and not just any food, but high calorie foods, because you've got a massive calorie deficit that we need to correct to make sure your body continues to function optimally. And if anyone's ever been in this situation, I think we know the feeling, right? That's where like anything fried, it looks really good right now. And that cake looks really good and dessert looks really good, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're like, oh my goodness, I was supposed to be good tonight with my food choices. So this is a little bit of the physiology of why we can set ourselves up often without realizing and with very good intentions around what we're doing, but set ourselves up nonetheless to not just overeat and end up overfull, but then feel very distressed about it. So that's the physiology of long periods of time without eating adequately. And what we want to do is we want to go back to that wave response that we were talking about, which is more consistent eating. Okay, so let's move up a few, Dani, because I'm just looking at the time here. We went snack 1, snack 2, macronutrients. I want to talk a little bit here about, again, myth busting. And, you know, for a lot of us, we've been told to avoid carbs. Carbs also contribute to, you know, gaining weight. And you may focus on protein and some little bit of healthy fat. But the reality is that if you cut out one of what we call macronutrients, if you cut out carbohydrates completely, you will find that when someone puts a breadbasket in front of you or puts pasta in front of you, you will find over time that you will feel almost like you're addicted to those carbohydrates, because you'll find that you'll pounce on the breadbasket and not be able to stop eating, or at least you'll have that feeling. A lot of our clients report that. And then they'll say, I'm addicted to carbs. I've got to stay away from them, because when I'm around carbs, I just overeat them. But for most people, 99% of people, that's actually not the case. And I'm sorry if there's a lot of people out there who will disagree with that statement. But what we understand now is it's more that because you've deprived yourself of a certain food, when you're around it, there's kind of a pendulum swing. And then we overeat. And it's this is again a physiological and also an emotional response to deprivation. If carbohydrate is modestly spread throughout your meals, and therefore you're not in a physiological deprivation or emotional psychological deprivation, you will find that your ability to be moderate with your macronutrients, including your carbohydrates, and yes, the breadbasket, will actually moderate out. And we see this all the time with our treatment with our clients. And again, this is evidence-based practice based upon the research. So if we go to the next slide, Dani, which is a little bit about why this is the case. So I think we all know that when we eat, we feel full, and that's because our stomach is a muscle and it stretches. And what happens during that process is our stomach has these stretch receptors in the stomach that signals, hey, the stomach is stretching. That means food's coming in. That means we're getting, hopefully, calories. If you're eating only lettuce, which I remember Kate Moss, you know, bragging about eating 14 heads of lettuce for dinner, then you're going to feel really full, but you're going to miss the key piece here that the body needs. And that is this piece over here called satiety. And what is satiety? Satiety is the body's way of making sure you are eating protein, some fat, and some carbohydrate. Those 3 macros for the body, those are non-negotiables. They need those 3 to do everything the body needs to do optimally. And if you miss out on any one of them, then the body is not functioning optimally. I mean, it's really that that simple and that difficult or complex. So satiety, what happens as the food goes in the stomach here, it gets churned up, starts to get broken down. Then it goes into, this part, which is the intestine. And as it goes through the intestine, it's broken down further and then it's absorbed into the body. And there are certain receptors at certain places in that intestine that absorb the protein and absorb the fat and absorb the carbohydrate. And when that's happening, that the intestine is then signaling to the brain, we've got some carb, we've got some protein, we've got some fat, and then there's a feeling of satiety. Okay, and that's this wonderful, amazing, I know I'm geeking out here, way that the body makes sure that we get those essential nutrients. And so if you've ever been full on lettuce and you're still cruising the cupboards because you're not really satisfied, that's probably what's going on. You're not getting the right macros. We'll go to the next slide, Dani, and I know we've got to finish up in a little bit of time. So eating on the road, protein, what do you do about that? Of course, go with your lean protein if that's important to you. Protein, as you know, makes you feel fuller for longer. And some examples here that are pretty quick and easy: omelets and scrambled, sauteed chicken, fish, seafood, burger, regular or turkey. If you are, again, without being obsessive about it, as I spoke about earlier, but you're just wanting to be moderate in your intake, maybe skipping the fries or just a few fries and skip the extra cheese if you want to keep it more consistent. Steamed chicken, fish, seafood, add dressing because there's not much fat in those choices there. Beans, chickpeas, quinoa, as we know, great examples of plant-based protein. For those of you who might be more vegetarian or vegan. Sandwich slices, ham and turkey, there's nothing wrong with those. I mean, there's the nitrates and such, but overall it still works in moderation. And then even a protein bar can help you out in emergencies. Advocate for yourself when you're at a restaurant or wherever you are with your gig, and don't be afraid to ask even if you don't see it on the menu. A lot of places can accommodate. Let's go to the next slide, Dani. So step 3, fats and oils, absolutely essential, but in moderation. So definitely don't skip those. They really help provide that satiety that keeps you fuller for longer and keeps your blood sugars leveled out for longer. And some examples: some olive oil with your bread, butter on your bread. I love butter. Olive oil, tomato-based pasta sauce. Again, if you're wanting to be, kind of sustainable and balanced and you don't usually eat heavy cream dishes, then maybe you want to skip that. Mozzarella cheese on your pizza is great. Sour cream for your baked potato and dressing on your salad. And then if you want to be a little bit thoughtful around your moderation without it being diety, you might want to measure out how much dressing you're putting on to make sure that it's enough, but it's also not swimming in it because that doesn't always taste so great as well. Let's go on to the next slide, Dani. Thanks. And then your carb, absolutely essential. And that's really where we get our fuel from. And that's also what is the key source of fuel for the brain. The brain will only use carbohydrates. So definitely don't skip it, especially if you want to be sharp and on. Provides energy, as you know. You've got your bread slices and rice, pasta, pizza, burger buns, baked potatoes, mashed potato, and instant noodles. Don't forget your instant noodles can also work. We'll go to the next slide, Dani. Fruits and veg, yeah, if you can, grab those if you can. Fiber can really help with regularity and bloating, and they're volume fillers, and that's where your nutrients are as well. Perishable fruits and veg, as we know, are very perishable, so it's much harder to transport those with us, and we're much more reliant on trying to find what we can on the road. So again, just do the best you can do, but do know that in a pinch, if you've got a kitchenette, not even in a pinch, microwavable bags of vegetables, they do those at the supermarkets a lot more now. So there's different ways that you can get those in. And again, advocate for yourself if you're able to. Next slide, Dani. So sample meal, and again, you know, this is from one of the Music Cares artists, was like, I live on cup noodles when I'm on tour because of my budget, and I can pack it in my suitcase. And I was like, that's great. That's great. And you know what? Yeah, okay, there's a lot of sodium in noodles, et cetera, et cetera. But if that's all you've got, that's okay. And then throw in some frozen peas, and that'll just kind of give you a few more nutrients. And that can be a great meal. And if it has to be a meal every single night, well, maybe it does for that week, and then you'll try and get some more variety when you can. Let's go to the next one, Dani. Thank you. Yep. So there you go. Same with chili. Chili's great as well. Throw in some peas. And the next one. And when I've been in Paris, of course, not of course, but, you know, the French baguette with some tomato and mozzarella or something. Listen, this can make a great little meal as well. A glass of wine, if that's your thing. So again, it doesn't have to be this elaborate thing. Let's go to the next one, Dani. And that's it. That's it. So we're going to wrap it up there. And this is just this is one slide of our space here in New York City, Balance Eating sort of treatment center. On the left there are some of our programs, from intensive day programs right through to 1 night a week groups. And we certainly have food and mood groups and body image and intuitive eating groups. And then of course, one-on-one nutrition counseling and one-on-one therapy and meal support as well, if you are looking for a little bit of support. And we can do those services virtually as well. So depending upon where you are, we can also support you virtually. And I think, is that our last slide, Dani? That's just our number. And were there any questions we needed to cover, Jamie, at the very end there?
Yeah, totally. So thanks so much for that, Mel and Dani. That was awesome. Super informative. Still a few people with us here in the group. And in our Q&A, we have Emily here who's asking a question about body image. So she's an actress, and photos especially are part of her work that can be really triggering for her.
Yeah.
So she was wondering kind of about like presence and feelings, and trying to manage feelings that come up around body image and a changing body that's in recovery from an eating disorder, and that sort of thing. Just any sort of thoughts you have about sort of managing negative body image, especially when you have to be confronted with it at work. And maybe I'll turn this over to Jury first, if you have any thoughts there before Mel gets into maybe more of the therapeutic aspect.
Absolutely. I deal with that all the time too. And thanks to social media, there are people who would kindly share their feedback about how I look.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's, again, there's no one body type that everyone likes.
That's right.
It's just what it is. Like, I think I'm on a slim figure, but then someone else will come to me and be like, oh, I know a perfect plastic surgery doctor for your breast. So just, your body's temple. If it feels good to you, it's yours only. And again, you can't please everybody. So body image is also human-made stuff.
Yes.
Really, it's made by the industries for them to sell stuff. Please keep that in mind, because doing this job, social media, all that, you're gonna hear all sorts of good and not so great comments from people, anonymous people. They don't even show who they are. So, okay, we are in it together. It's a struggle, but it just prioritize how it feels to you. I think it's the most important.
Jury, so wise. They're so wise. And I can't even imagine, you know, we counsel our clients, but not all of our clients are artists, where you have a public image and people feel they can say whatever they want about that, right? Believe it or not. So I love that. Your body is your temple. And actually, I'm going to ask Dani for her therapeutic insight, because she actually has been running our body image groups, and this is one of her areas of specialty. Dani, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I work a lot with a lot of actors and performers.
Yes,
so
yes.
Here's an important thing nobody talks about when it comes to perception. We never accurately view our body, no matter if you have disordered eating, an eating disorder, or not. Perception is not accurate. We can never accurately perceive ourselves. The way I see myself on the screen is different than how you see me. If we were in person, I would see myself different than how Jury sees me, than how Melainie sees me. So if we can never accurately perceive what we look like, why even try? Why even try to compare ourselves to old versions of ourselves or other people if the way our brain works, it's so influenced by family of origin, trauma, diet culture, the systems that Jury spoke to, the $72 billion a year industry that is diet culture. All of that affects how we see ourselves, and it's not real. So if we can hold on to that truth when it comes to images or seeing ourselves on camera or in the TV pilot or in a selfie we took, we're never going to really know. So release ourselves, have the self-compassion, word of the day, to not know, and let that be okay.
Is there any advice you could also give, I think just off of Emily's question, for people who are looking to maybe counteract some of this culture kind of actively in their lives? You know, I'm confronted with it at a shoot or on stage. You know, I'm confronted with this kind of version of my body that is bringing up these like cultural emotions. You know, how can I combat that with, you know, the person who's asking me to perform in a certain thing, or the person who's asking me to be in a certain body for a shoot day, or that sort of thing?
Yeah. One thing we know about body checking, which is how this is categorized, is that it's actually a function of anxiety. Usually there is I am anxious about something at my body. I just need to check. I just need to look. That will make me feel better. That will help me know. But it never works. You look and it amps up the anxiety. It actually creates this loop to get off of. So the first thing to do, if it's on social media or if it is photos, is to limit your exposure to it and to really give yourself some space. It also might mean recurating your social media. Who do you follow? Do you need to flood your page with some people who are in the radical acceptance or are really pushing back against some of these narratives? It does start with kind of what you're exposed to as well. And of course, if we get fed the same line, we believe that is true. But if you can get access to other people who are rejecting and limit your exposure to it, give yourself space from it, I think that can help.
Totally agree, Dani. And we encourage our clients to actually, as Dani said, to curate more body positive or body neutral people to follow on social, for example, to counter all that negativity. And I imagine Jury, and for a lot of artists out there, my goodness, you're going to get overwhelmed with a lot of stuff that you really don't like. No, thank you. Thank you. I don't want to hear it. And so you gotta really actively take care of yourself and have that counter voice that is supportive and accepting and helps you stay grounded in, as you said, in the idea that the way we perceive our body is so distorted, and to stay close to that, my body is my temple, and also it's no one else's business, right? Great question there. Jamie, were there any others? Because we only just got a couple of minutes before we wrap up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We're almost at time, folks. So we have one more question from someone in the chat. And at the same time, I'll be sharing some information from us, which I'll explain in a second. But our last question here is, so as we return to work, this person's finding it difficult to manage eating around a new busy schedule, also super relevant to this sort of tour life and the sort of, you know, planning around snacks that you're asking before from folks. So this person's schedule has kind of leaned back to kind of consistently eating their last meal very late in the evening. And they're asking for specific advice around managing, kind of correcting that schedule over time.
Absolutely. I'll take that one as the nutritionist on the team. What we find there when people are, so first and foremost, it's a little bit of a overstatement that if you eat late at night, well, if you eat late at night and then go straight to bed, it can, interrupt your sleep. You can have GI problems, but we're also told by diet culture that you'll gain a lot of weight if you do that. And that's actually not the case. So I'm imagining, even though we're weight neutral at Balance, but I know that there's probably a lot of people out there who are, I want to keep my weight, where it is and not have big shifts. So, but my schedule may lead to weight gain. Is that the case? So what I would say is, we know this for sure. If you don't eat enough during the day, by the time you do get to eat late at night, you're going to eat a lot and overeat. And if you remember that, the spike and crash graph that I showed you earlier. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you can't change that, you can't change it. So let's work with it. And let's make sure that you've got a decent, maybe lunch for you, therefore, is 5 or 6 o'clock, and dinner is now 11 or 12 o'clock. And that's okay. And maybe you have a snack around 9 p.m. And so maybe breakfast for you is something around, 2 p.m. Or maybe you have a couple of different smaller meals based upon your sleep schedule as well. So I would reverse engineer from what you can't change with that late night, and reverse engineer, but still make sure you're having enough food throughout the day, if that's at all possible. And if meals are not possible, make sure you have enough snacks so you're not in a deficit. All right, and I know we're at 4:30, Jamie, back to you. And of course, Stephanie, I'm sure you've got some last words as well.
Cool. Yeah, so thanks so much, Mel. Before I turn it over to Stephanie and also close us out and say goodbye, just wanted to share in the chat, I've sent you a bunch of links. I'll draw attention first to Jury. Emergency Tiara has a show in Elsewhere. I believe is it your EP release party?
No, it's just, but it's going to be a first full band show back. So I could use a lot of moral support because I'm so nervous. So if you could be there, that'd be amazing.
What's the date on it, Jury?
It's on August 6th.
Great.
And it's going to be a big, fun night. So come
awesome. Elsewhere in Brooklyn, New York, right?
Yes.
August 6th. Fantastic.
I'm right near Elsewhere, can vouch that it's amazing to go to. So please come to that. Links in there for tickets. Scott from the Rough and Tumble has left us for the day, but you can find their tour dates as well in the chat. On our end, we'd just like to offer that we have more webinars every month, just like this one, and you can check out a link to all of those, which will be changing as dates come up. You can also watch a recording of this webinar and all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel. The link is in the chat there. We also have free support groups. So that'll be a meeting format that'll be with our leadership. So either Mel or one of our directors. And that will be a place where you can get all of your questions answered about eating disorder recovery. And we have those 3 times a month, and they're all free, always free. Would love to have you there. You can also give us a call at our number, copy that down from the chat, and you're going to be sent a survey when you leave. So let us know what's going on with you and if there's any more information we can provide from our end. Stephanie, would you like to say anything else before we leave?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks to everyone from Balance. This post-pandemic world is something that we're still just actively sticking our toes in the water and figuring out what that looks like. Jury, I just hope the show is amazing. I can only imagine that. I hope you get that energy exchange while you're on stage and you feel the love. I think we've all been so isolated for so long, and it's affected us all so differently, but just want everyone to remember and know that you're not alone. Clearly, there are lots of people out there that want to help and want to create that community. So reach out to Balance, reach out to Music Cares, and just know that we're here to support you. And thank you all for being here today.